Chapter 22. Epilogue. Atsushi sat motionless on the submarine as it hurled away from the ship. He was in shock. Akutagawa is dead. His mind repeated. He wanted to just stop existing. The numbness in his body was fading, and slowly, agonizing pain crept into its place. He couldn't even remember a time when he had not known this pain. No time to pity yourself, he heard a familiar voice say. Dazai sat across from him, his long legs folded beneath him. There is still work to be done. I can't, Atsushi said aloud, even though he knew that the specter in front of him was not really Dazai. It was his mind, taking the form that he needed to deal with his worthless life. Of course you can, the illusion of Dazai said. Don't let his death be in vain. Atsushi wiped away the tears and nodded, clenching his fists. He stood and walked to the communications panel, scanning it carefully. He guessed that he could reach the mainland with the radio, but if he did that, they would be waiting to arrest him as soon as he came ashore. He had to stay hidden a little longer, at least until they could figure out another way to clear the detective agency's name. Just when he was about to give up, he heard a crackle of static coming from the pocket of Akutagawa's coat. Akutagawa! The voice said again. Proceeding out of sheer determination, Atsushi fished out the forgotten radio from Akutagawa's coat pocket. Hello? He said desperately, trying to stop his hands from shaking. This is Atsushi Nakajima! Atsushi! The voice said. Then a faint laugh was heard. It's Ango. What is your status? I've escaped the mastermind, he said, trying to hide the panic in his voice. I am in a submarine. It's on autopilot. Atsushi could hear fingers tapping on a keypad. I can override the controls, but you will have to get out and swim when I tell you to. Can the both of you make it? Ango asked. It's only me, Atsushi said, the last word catching in his throat. Yes, I can make it, he said after a long pause. He felt a shift in movement as the vessel changed direction. He could feel the nausea creeping up on him. Wrapping the coat around him a little tighter, he sunk to the floor once again and cried. He lowered his head, his nose barely touching the collar. It smelled like Akutagawa. The thought calmed him. You still feel the bond, he heard Dazai say. As long as you feel that, he's not gone. Atsushi sniffled before looking up at Dazai. But what if I can't save him? It seemed that Phantom Dazai didn't have an answer for him, because just as he looked up, the image faded. You never deserved him anyway, a deep, resonating voice said in his place. The headmaster stood looking down on him. Atsushi stared up at him, eyes filled with defiance. A good-for-nothing like yourself never deserved love. Go away, he said between gritted teeth. Atsushi closed his eyes, as if doing that would make the dreaded figure disappear. Of course, when he opened his eyes again, the headmaster still loomed over him. Without flinching, Atsushi stood up to face the headmaster. I don't need you anymore, he said, his voice steady. He flinched when the headmaster raised his hand, his laughter ringing throughout the empty sub. Look how far you have come. The headmaster smirked. When I died, you needed permission to cry. This man tried to kill you multiple times, yet you shed tears for him so easily. He loved me. I love him, Atsushi said, turning his eyes away. Atsushi! Prepare to exit, he heard Ango say over the radio. There was a moment of silence, then Ango came back panicked. Atsushi! Understood, he said at last. He stood silently and turned towards the hatch. Dazai appeared behind him. You need to leave the coat behind, he said gently. Atsushi hesitated, fingers tightening around the fabric. No. You need the tiger to swim that distance. You need to leave the coat behind, Dazai said quietly. It's his. I need to keep it. He muttered to himself. Jinko, Akutagawa said sweetly. Save yourself. Leave the coat behind. Atsushi smiled, releasing his hand from the coat and slipping out of the sleeves. He watched as it fell to the floor, missing its comforting weight. He took a deep breath, holding back his emotions as he knew he must focus on the mission ahead. He stepped forward and pressed the button to release the hatch, and braced himself against the rush of water that flooded the small vessel. Tiger, lead me to the shore, he said as he swam out into the murky waters. The waves crashed against Atsushi's body, but he pushed forward, driven by determination and the urge to fulfill the task at hand. Akutagawa was not going to have died in vain. He would clear their names and bring down the man who was behind it all.